This video is for lesson 4.1. So have your note sheets out, your book available, so we can take a look at the ideas here. So chapter 4 um, begins with a question. The question is, what is the relationship between educational attainment levels, the levels that you obtain through education, and your earned income potential? So thinking about how those two quantities or variables are related is kind of the basis of what we're doing in this lesson. We're talking about correlation. How are they related or correlated? And how we study that. We study that through scatter diagrams. So in a question like this, educational attainment, I think many of us would believe the more education we obtain, um, the more potential we have to earn money, more money income for our families. And that's probably one reason why we're in school, or why I went to school, and why you're here taking this class. So that's a relationship. And what's happening here is we're studying two variables here. Two variables are related as opposed to just one variable in all the other lessons. Um, and in this case, when we think about these relationships, we think about one of them being what's called the explanatory variable and one being the response variable. So in these cases here, where we're talking about, to help fill out your note sheets there, um, the response variable is the variable whose value can be explained by the value of the explanatory or predictor variable, right? And so that's what you would put into there. And then in order to study those relationships, right, the response variable is the variable whose value can be explained by the value of the explanatory or predictor variable. So we use that language, predictor variable. And in order to kind of study that relationship, we create what's called a scatter diagram, or you might hear me call this a scatter plot, okay, or scatter diagram. And how is that created? The scatter diagram is created, right? First, it's a graph that shows the relationship between two quantitative variables. So now we're going to be looking at two variables measured against each other. Each individual in the data set is represented by a point in the scatter diagram or scatter plot, and the explanatory variable is on the horizontal axis. Horizontal, right there. And when we say the horizontal, what we're talking about from algebra is the x-axis. And in this case, when we're talking about the vertical axis, we are talking about the vertical axis would be the y-axis. And so that's what we're discussing here on the note sheets here. It shows the relationship between the two variables. And so the scatter diagram is a graph that shows the relationship between two quantitative. For by now you should be familiar with the difference between quantitative and qualitative. Measured on the same individual, each individual in the data set is represented by a point. And so we're looking, you draw a point in the scatter diagram. Again, this is plotted on the explanatory is on the horizontal axis and vertical axis here for the response variable. And so I'll give an example. This is maybe not the most interesting situation, but looking at if you ever played sports or played golf, they swing a stick with a club at the head. And of course, the faster you swing it, the farther the ball would go, you would imagine. So what we want to do is create a scatter diagram. And so that's what we're going to do. So you see, here are two variables here. You might want to call this might be the explanatory, and this would be the response, meaning that how fast you swing the club is related to how far the ball would go. So let's go ahead and take a look at how to graph that. Instructions are here how to do that, and also we will do it here to show you, I'll demonstrate it. So I already have the data in. Let's go ahead and take a look. Here it is, the club head, how fast you're swinging it, and then how far the ball goes. So in order to do that, we want to graph, and then you see a scatter plot or scatter diagram. The x variable is club head, which is the explanatory. The y-axis is the distance, the response variable. And then you go ahead and plot that out. There you go. And so take time to recreate that real quick. You can pause and do that. But that's what we're looking at here. And so what we want to do is put that graph into your notes so that you have this graph. So there's the relationship. We're looking at that there. And so we can go ahead and see that as you're looking at this here, as the club head, you swing it faster, it looks like the ball goes farther. There's a relationship there that exists. Let's see if we can get it in. There's a relationship, and so you would want to plot that out. And so there is what the graph would look like. There is your first scatter diagram. And so that's what you'd want to put into this right there. Okay, so you have that relationship there. And so you can see there seems to be some relationships we're going to describe. So you have your graph, club head, speed of the club head explains or predicts how far the ball will travel. So it looks like there's some relationship. And so this is again different than what we were doing before with one variable and looking at the values of one variable. And so in this case, what kind of relationship does this exist? We want to describe those relationships. And here are the pictures of how we're going to describe them. You'll see how we can say something is a linear relationship. If it kind of looks like a line, nonlinear. This is like no relationship. It just kind of has no pattern. This one has some patterns just on a line. And so specifically for this class, what we care about is when two variables are linear related are, we would say positively correlated. So that's a term we're going to use. Correlated, or I think if we look in our books, that's a word they're also going to use the word associated. You might say associated. When and it's kind of complex when above average values of one variable are associated with above average values of the other variable. But I think the best description of this, the one that makes more sense here, it's positively correlated, positively associated if whenever the value of one variable increases, the value of the other variable also increases. And so you can see it's positively that there increases. This is positively correlated or associated. Look at as the values increase this way, these values increase. They get higher. So that's why it would be positively associated. And the same is true, they are negatively associated when as the value of one variable increases, the other variable decreases. And so you can see an example here. This would be positive right here, and this would be negative. And if you recall from these associations are related to the idea of slope, related to slope from algebra. Okay, these ideas here of positive and negative. So we want to make sure we take a look at that. And so we have some association.